now my pleasure to welcome two of our university trustees who experienced those early, heady days 3 decades ago when Columbia College turned forever in a new direction. Wanda Holland Greene and Claire Shipman. They each display enormous dedication and great wisdom in serving Columbia, and I have come to enormously value their counsel and collaborative spirit. Wanda is the head of the renowned Hamlin School in San Francisco and has been at the forefront of supporting women and underrepresented minorities who seek positions of leadership in education. She graduated from the college in 1989. Claire was among a select group of women who graduated from Columbia College in 1986 after having transferred as a second-year student from Michigan when the college's first class of women matriculated. Claire is known to many of you through her very accomplished career in journalism and as an author. Thank you very much.
Do you love it that we both have our reading glasses?
I know.
3 decades.
Well, Lee, thank you. And I just, and I know we both feel this way, that there's nobody who's more a champion of diversity, and we've seen it firsthand on the board than Lee, and we're really lucky to have your leadership on that issue, so thank you. We talked a lot about how we wanted this to go, and we decided the conversation was going to be the best way. We were talking about girls, as you've probably seen in the program, and then we started thinking who would ask the first question, and I won. So Wanda, yes, I won. Wanda, tell us, and this was actually such a great imagery. Wanda, we were talking about this on the phone call, but the girls we were when we arrived at Columbia. So tell me about the girl you were when you stood at the gates 3 decades ago.
3 decades ago. But we look good. We look good.
Yes.
You know, I arrived literally the same way I arrived this morning. I arrived in 1985 on the subway. I'm a Brooklyn girl. We're my people. And I'm a first-generation college graduate. Anyone first gens? And my mother handed me $1,000 that she had borrowed from my Uncle Willie, her older brother. And she gave me a big hug, and she said, "You go for it." And all of my things were in, I don't know, I'm going to really date myself. Remember when you used to go to the grocery store, and there were those metal carts that you could put your groceries in? No? Okay, whatever. Google it. But all of my things were in that cart. So I didn't arrive with the station wagon and the boxes, and I arrived with my cart and that $1,000, which I knew was the only support I was going to have, financial support I was going to have from my parents, who are amazing. In fact, today is the day my dad died 19 years ago. And I was this confident, in spite of it all, right? This confident Brooklyn girl who showed up in what felt like another world, because Brooklyn and Manhattan, we used to say the city. You know, Manhattan was the city, far away in many ways. But I had by age 17, these deeply immersive experiences in race and gender that made me feel like I belonged on campus. And I'm a graduate of the Shipman School, all-girls school on the Upper East Side of Manhattan. And I'm the daughter of a minister, and we were, and Minyam Moore, my dear, dear friend, is here. We lived in church. We lived in this black church. So the music, the people, the poetry, the plays, everything was very affirming. So when you have those deeply immersive experiences as a black person, and you have these deeply immersive experiences as a girl, everything at Chapin spoke to me and said, "You're powerful, you're great." In fact, there were only about 45 girls in my graduating class, and 6 of us came to Columbia. Which is a big deal. Wow. It's a big deal. We were ready. We were like, Co-education, we're on it. It requires us. We will be there to raise our hands in class. And so I was ready. And you look, freshman year, Janet Jackson, Control. So I was like, when I was 17. I was like, so I was all grown up and in control. And I felt great. So I was poor, but happy and smart and ready to go. And I moved into Carmen Hall, 703B. 7th floor Carmen. And I loved it. So, you know, when I think about all the ways I could have shown up, I could have been timid, or I could have been scared, or sad, or quiet. Certainly not quiet, but I was ready. I was ready, and I was really, really happy to be here. So that was me, 17. Yeah, loved it, loved it. And you, the girl.
Okay, I wasn't as confident as Wanda, but I'm not sure very many of us in the room are. So I don't. I showed up as a transfer student, and I grew up in Ohio, so I was a little more cautious. New York was the really big city, but I was really excited about the experience, and I think that I was cautious and a little bit perfectionistic. And Columbia was an incredible place for me to learn confidence, I think, because it requires it, right? You don't, and certainly the Columbia of 1985 required even more confidence to navigate and sort out and figure out, and nobody was spoon feeding us anything. We had to figure out, there were a lot of obstacles to almost all classes.
The co-ed showers.
Yeah.
Remember that?
The co-ed, no.
Not
See,
co-ed showers, but bathrooms that were co-ed.
Right. Co-ed showers, didn't have that. I'm gonna get us back on the rails. But, so I think it was transformative for me in terms of the opportunity, but also just learning to deal with a lot of things that, and by the time I finished, I was ready. I felt ready to do almost anything. And I don't think I really had put together that part of my education until I started studying confidence and where you get it. And I realized, it wasn't only about everything I learned in CC or Russian studies. There's so much more.
I think you're right. I think there's that perfect blend of what you show up with and then what happens to you. It's I was psychology and English double major. It was the organism and the environment, right? And so the organism, we showed up as something, but then we were placed in this incredibly vibrant place. And I was so glad that the soil was ready. I think people sometimes wonder if the soil was ready for the seeds to be planted. And I don't know about you, Claire, but I never felt somehow that someone was pulling in the opposite direction as we showed up as women growing and evolving. I didn't feel that people were kind of trying to unravel us, but they were trying to grow us and to cultivate the women that we wanted to be. So I don't know if that's how you felt while you were here.
I didn't feel that. We were taught, Leah was just talking to both of us before we came out here about that. Did we feel any resistance at all? And not at all. I think it was so late. I think this place was more than ready.
Right.
I don't think there was any... Right, it was like, just move right in. We were ready to go.
We did our homework and our reading and all the good stuff.
But what do you see? All right, so you are this, the image of confidence, right?
Most days.
But you steer a lot of young girls. What do you see in terms of young girls and confidence these days? What do you think are the lessons they need, and where do they stand?
I spend my days with over 500 women. 420 of them are under the age of 14. I'm the mother of 2 sons, which is great. It's great. So I have a great balanced life. But what I see at school are really interesting things. The first is that there is a sense in girls still in 2017 that you cannot let them see you sweat, as they say. That there's this idea, or allure, I call it, of perfectionism is still very much there. And it shows up academically, it shows up in the dining room when they think, I literally got rid of all milk in the containers because one was 2% and one was non-fat, and the girls would have, 5-year-olds have conversations about which milk was better for you. We now have milk machines. You can't tell it's all hormone-free, antibiotic-free, it's California. But they were everywhere we looked. Girls were striving to do things well and to do things, and I don't get me wrong, I believe in the pursuit of excellence, but I don't believe in perfectionism and flawlessness. I believe in vulnerability and striving, and in fact, I think that's the way confidence is built, actually, when you fail. But the girls, 5 to 14, are striving for ways to be seen and to be experienced as perfect. And, we, frankly, have to fight against that every day. And I say, just leave PE and go to math class and stop it with the hair and the this and just go, just be who you are. But I think there's a lot of pressure for them to not show how hard you're working, which is really hard to have on one hand someone say you need to achieve great things, but don't let anyone see actually how hard you're working. In fact, remember Never Let Them See You Sweat? Was that,
right.
Whatever, what was it? Deodorant, hair? I can't remember what the commercial was. But, so there's that. And I think girls' schools do a remarkable job of countering some of that perfectionism, but it's there. Even in what your body looks like. In 2010, we built a dance studio at school. And I made sure that the mirrors could be erased. So the walls can close the mirrors down or open them. And they're closed most of the time because the girls would stop to dance because a hair was out of place or because the leotard was not quite tucked. And so this idea that we need to make sure that girls are messy. My grandmother would have said raggedy. She was from the South. I think it's really important that we resist the lure of perfectionism. So that's one, and I think about that every day. But the other thing, which I think is really interesting with girls, is that they are struggling with their intellectual horsepower. How much to render that visible to the world? And we are a highly academic school, and I love that about Hamlin, and we're unapologetically bright girls and curious and ready to change the world. But there's this idea that achievement and strength are negatively correlated with being liked. And it's not even an idea, it's research-based. The higher you go, the fewer friends you have for females. And they go back and forth with this idea of what has currency. And for a girl, being smart doesn't always have currency. And so I constantly have to say to them, as most of them go off to co-ed high schools when they leave Hamlin, I say, you need to continue to raise your hand. When I hand you this diploma, this is your passport to life, not just to high school, and I don't want you to eclipse your intelligence. But they struggle with it because, frankly, there are so few women in the world who are heralded for being smart. People like you, Claire, frankly, who we know how smart you are. I remember, Claire's in Moscow. Oh, my God. That's my, Claire, she's like, what were you, like 20-something in Moscow doing your work? And so I think we need more celebration of the life of the mind. And there's not a whole lot of that going on for girls. And I think part of the joy of being the head of a girls' school is being able to push the intellectual strength of the girls forward and have that be celebrated as opposed to eclipsed by other attributes of being a woman. And I could go on and on about that, but I just think that perfectionism and that, what do I do with my brain? Do I let people see it? Do I not? If I tell people how smart I am I going to have a date?
Right.
My 16-year-old, most of them, when they leave, they always say, Miss Holland Greene, it took me a long time to have a date in high school because I was really smart in science and that was just not attractive. I was like, too bad. You wait for the one to see that as a strength.
I think it's funny when you talked about the excellence and the perfectionism, because especially the excellence piece, because one of the things we found most interesting when we were doing research on confidence was, and I know you're friends with Carol Dweck, right? Yeah. So she and her, she wrote this great book, Mindset. I don't know how many of you have read that, but she told us at the time, because we kept struggling with this notion of surely girls achieve so much in school now and in college, right, all the way through. How can there be a confidence problem with young women? And then what's happening when they get, what's the disconnect? And she said to us, if life were one long grade school, girls would rule the world. And that was really one of the most memorable phrases, because really what she explained is that the rules in school and even college are really different than the rules in the real world. And so girls learn to play very well by that first set of rules. Even if they're feeling they might not want to do so well in science. I mean, girls can knock that stuff out of the park. From the earliest ages, right? We color within the lines, we please people, we want to do well on our tests. And then we parents and teachers are encouraging that, because who doesn't want that? Yeah. I mean, it's much better to have kids who are well behaved and doing what they're supposed to be doing. And what we realized is that then girls, by the time they're hitting high school, are full-blown people pleasers and perfectionists, because did I just knock my mic out? Because they've learned that that's partly why they're valuable, if not entirely.
Absolutely.
And what does that mean? They don't want to take risks. Right. Because who wants to risk failing? If you're trying to be perfect, you certainly can't risk failure.
Absolutely.
And boys, on the other hand, and I've seen this firsthand because I have one of each, and I honestly, when my kids were younger, I thought, God, all that generalization, it's so stupid and obnoxious. That's ridiculous. It's just that people give boys trucks more often. And then I'm like, oh my God, they're sort of true. But boys from earliest ages, maybe I think I'm sitting on my mic. Let me move a little. There. They learn to fail and screw up because they just do it, right? They do it.
And they don't care who's watching.
They don't care. They do it early on. And the fact is they learn it's okay, because they learn, I did it and I can keep doing it because it didn't matter all that much. Yeah. And they're getting those lessons of risk-taking and failure that are really, as Wanda said, that's what builds confidence. Yeah. And so to me, that's the real, how do we teach girls, even in an era, and believe me, Jim Valentini and I have this discussion almost every time we meet. I mean, everybody's so focused on college, right? And this kind of, how do we get in? And so how do you teach young girls to try things that are outside of their comfort zone, to fail, to do things that are a little bit harder? At the same time, there's all this pressure on young people to excel.
Yeah, I love Carol. Carol was at Columbia before she was at Stanford. I like to remind her that she's a Brooklyn girl as well. And one of the things in her book Mindset, and if you don't have it, it's really worth getting and reading. She talks about how we speak to girls. And I noticed this particularly as the mother of sons, because I remember when David and Jonathan, my boys, who are now 9 and 12, when people would say things to them, even when they were little, they would ask questions about what they were doing, their efficacy. How hard did you, jump off the bed? I'm like, stop encouraging them to jump off the bed. How high did you climb, David? What did you do today? And you know what we say to girls? Look at your bangs. Did you just get your ears pierced? We talk to them about things that they cannot help. How tall are you? I say, and one of the dangers as we speak to girls is we compliment them on things that are not within their control. Yeah. Their genetic code will tell them how tall they will be. Maybe your hair will be long, maybe it'll be short, who knows? But how we speak to them reinforces their thinking about who they are and who they can be. So when you say to a girl, or to a boy for that matter, how hard did you work on that puzzle? I bet you read 20 pages today. Tell me what you thought about the character Charlotte Doyle, and Avi is one of my favorite children's authors. And you cause them to think inside, not about their outsides, but about their insides, and you praise them for effort rather than outcome. That is what allows girls to persist. And this kind of learned helplessness, when you say, oh, this idea of a natural athlete. Oh, Michael Jordan, you know why he shot foul shots so well? Because he stayed after practice when everyone else left and shot some more. And he did the work. The reason why people get good at what they do is because of practice, right? And so this idea that we should praise the outcome. You have an A on the test. Wrong. Tell me about how you studied for the test. Right. And the more we talk about effort, the more girls persist instead of thinking that everything's outside their control.
Well, and also and I think the flip side of that she talks about is in the growth mindset. The girls are much more likely to say, I didn't do well on the test because I'm bad at math.
That's
and
right.
Boys are much more likely to say, as my son said to me yesterday, I was late for school because somebody else put my tennis shoes in the mudroom.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Or, I just didn't study. The test wasn't what they said. And it really, and in fact, it sounds ridiculous. That's a healthier mindset to have instead of the kind of this fixed, I knew I was bad at that, which girls tend to develop at a much earlier age. And I love your notion of the action, because this is something else we've been diving into with research on girls now, which is that one of the best ways you can create confidence in girls, but really also teach them to take risks. Speaking up for something is to tap into their passion and also tap into their desire to do for other people or other causes or other issues. If you can really tap into activism, especially for girls, it's incredibly powerful. Because number one, it gets the focus off of the me, which is just always debilitating. And so the more you can say to them, think about this, think about that, and what can you do about it? And so that you're creating this image of a girl that's much more active. And exactly like Wanda said, what are you doing? Judge yourself on what you're doing and what you've done, not this static, curated image that you're going to post on Instagram, or you'll measure with how many likes you have. It's, trying to figure.
There you go.
Sorry, hope nobody's here from Instagram, which
I know,
I love
right?
Instagram
Sorry.
too,
No.
but I think there are ways, to use those tools, but we have to get girls thinking about what they do. Like, to me, that is the most important thing, and it is a natural, and it's really interesting that girls and women, at least right now, and I think boys and men may evolve to this position, but they are more likely to be motivated by things outside of themselves. And so that's what you even see, right, with grown women. They're more likely to say, I want to work at a company that values this, even if I'm going to earn somewhat less money for that, right? They're just that, they have a slightly different value set, and you see it in girls. And so it's really powerful when you can tap into that.
Yeah, I hesitate to use the word esteem. There was the self-esteem movement. Everybody gets a trophy for, showing up. And I think when I think about my work with girls and with adults, I like to use the word efficacy. It's a very different word than esteem. I think esteem feels to me like a compliment, some sort of, it feels a little bit hollow to me that, I have great self-esteem. But efficacy is about, I'm a daughter of a minister, so this idea of, if you say, let there be light, there will be light. If you say, I'm going to do that, stuff happens. And I think that's frankly how women should show up in the world. When you walk into a meeting, you should be able to say to yourself, and then back it up, the meeting is better because I was here. Columbia is better because women showed up. That's just true. This is true. Right? Thank you, Lee. It's better. It's better now. It's better now. And it was better in the 80s because we arrived, because we wrote our papers and did our work, and we wanted to be in school. And I'm not saying the boys didn't, but we enhanced the sense of engagement. And so this idea of being active in the world, of being empathic and giving something away and feeling the affirmation of being a global citizen, I think that's incredible. And my girls at Hamlin, the mission of the school is to prepare girls to meet the challenges of their time. The school is 154 years old. That has been the mission the whole time. The woman who started our school could not vote. I mean, can you imagine handing out diplomas to women for decades and they can't even vote? I mean, it's just mind-boggling to me that basically what she was saying, this is an affirmation of faith. You go change the world in spite of, I know you don't see the world that you want to inherit, but we're going to create it. We're going to predict the future by creating it. And I think that's how you get girls to persist as well, as you just said so beautifully. Change things, make stuff happen, and when you do that, the sense of power and efficacy you have when you do it makes you do it again. I love that.
Well, and that sense of efficacy is, and power is so important. One of the other things we were talking about with Bernice too, that's such a struggle when you think about educating girls on this particular issue is how honest, essentially, do you want to be?
Yeah.
Like, how much do you want to say to a 12-year-old girl, you know, when you're 24, your confidence will plummet by 25% when you hit the workplace. So you may feel great now, or even to young college students, right? We know you feel great now and you're killing all your classes and the boys seem ridiculous, but you're not going to feel that. You know, it's not a great message. And I struggle with this as a mother, too. I mean, for a long time, I really wanted to hide from my daughter those placemats that had all the presidents on them and there were no female faces. Like, as soon as she was like, all that's out of the house, you know, we're not talking about it, because, you know, you just want to give this empowering message. And then I've realized, but I want to hear what you have to say as the expert on this educationally, but that, you know, being open and teaching them the truth to some extent, but also teaching them that they have the power to change it and noticing things. So I think helping them become aware of what they see and talking about it is probably healthier than trying to hide it. I mean, I know with Della, she's an athlete, and so we spent time recently in the Nike store. She likes to play basketball, and we had 2 years ago, I guess, been in a Nike store in Seattle where I had noticed there were no pictures of girls doing anything, right? It was in the kids section. It was only boys. And so much to her dismay, I went to the manager, pulled her along with me. She's just like,
don't do this.
Mom, I hate you. I hate being your daughter, you know, so this is the... And then the manager was so embarrassed. He's like, oh, my fiance is going to kill me. Oh my God, you're right. I had no idea. And, you know, he's looking around. So we go in Washington 2 years later, and I said, Della, look, they have pictures of girls and boys. You know, I don't think it was us, but she said, no, Mom, look at the pictures of the girls. All of the girls were posing in athletic gear. The boys were actually playing basketball and doing things. The girls were bending over to tie a shoelace, or they were sort of putting their hand, and it was but she was so mad, and she noticed. And then when we tried to guess what? They don't carry women's basketball shoes at Nike. Try to go and they don't carry them. You can get them online, but you can't try them on in the store. So, And it's frustrating, but then we have these conversations about, all right, so what do you want to do? Should you get your team and other teams, you all go to Nike and ask for shoes? Should you, what can you do about it, right? Like, what are you going to do?
That's what we do at Columbia.
And, right. And, but what is your take on how much is too much? And how do you sort of...
Now, it's really interesting. You know, there's certain topics in history, certain facts about our past, our present, and our future that I think we as parents and educators sometimes are tempted to put in a box. And then we think there's some magical age when you should say, surprise, actually, that's not true, or actually, this is what you call your body parts, or whatever it is. Like, people kind of box up knowledge. And I don't believe in that. I believe that there's an appropriate way to talk about everything from the beginning. And so, you know, I'm raising 2 black men in America. And I say to David and Jonathan, you know what, you don't get to play with toy guns in the front yard. You don't get to do that, and here's why. And there's a sweet spot between scaring people to death and being cynical about the world, and also preparing for reality. So I'm sure there's maybe some woman or women in the room this morning who are like, I am confident, forget about the gaps and codes, I'm fine, I'm good. And aren't we post, this is my pet peeve, aren't we post-racial, post-gender, we are post-nothing, hello, we are still in it. And I think we need to talk about the reality, because you cannot argue with data, right? Across industries, we still have work to do. So we celebrate that we're not where we used to be. You know, my yearbook page, there's a quote by Langston Hughes that says, dear God, we ain't what we want to be, we ain't what we gonna be, but thank God we ain't what we was. And so you say that. We're not, I don't fear when I walk into a school every day that somehow someone's gonna tell us that we can't be in school together. That as a black woman, I can't be in a school that's leading, a multicultural environment. There's no one with a sign that says, women here and men there. So we do need to talk about progress, but I think if we send girls out into the world and we don't tell them that there are no sneakers at the Nike store, I think we leave them ill-prepared. And I think and ill-equipped to change anything, because they don't have knowledge. So I'm not a big fan of just taking the high road every day and just celebrating. Let's just talk about the good stuff because, and this is what parents say to me, I want to preserve her innocence. I don't want to tell her that.
Yeah.
And then I say, well, if you don't get there first, guess what? Someone else is going to tell her. And then she's going to be empty. So I believe in bringing kids to the proverbial gas station. Fill them up, inoculate them, if you will, with all the good stuff. So when they do confront that thing, whatever that ism is, whatever that schism is, that they are able to say, that's not me. So when the first time someone said, to me that I don't belong somewhere, I then look at them with the one eye up. I'm like, really? I'm so sad your world is so small that you don't understand that competence can look like this. That you flip it as opposed to thinking, I've been, assaulted verbally by someone who's now making me feel small. So I don't believe in hiding the information from kids. Again, I don't have CNN on a loop at school, right, and showing them everything that's going on. But I do think there is, as I said, a sweet spot between preparation for the world and fierce optimism.
But do you think, okay, so I feel like this leads us into the single-sex education, right? And so we just heard a lot about how great Columbia College was when it became, men and women. But there is really still a case to be made that at some point for girls, and I think for boys too, from what I've read in the data, that single-sex education can make sense. Maybe not forever and maybe not for everybody, but why is it that, with all of these arguments for diversity and what diversity brings, why is it, do you find that it's good for girls to be on their own for a bit?
I like, as I said in the beginning, I like immersive experiences. And a lot of times people say, well, Wanda, isn't an all-girls environment or an all-boys environment? Isn't that fake? Aren't you, you're not preparing them. And I say, their lives are co-ed, their classrooms are not. So it's not, I don't lock them up, and let them out in 9 years. They have a very robust co-ed life. But I think we do need affinity groups. Mm-hmm. We need times when we're with our people. There are times when you use fewer words, when you're with people, that know you in a certain way in a certain place. So I like being with my Columbia girlfriends. I like being with my Brooklyn girlfriends because I like when I say, can we just buy one slice of pizza? When I say that to my friends who are Brooklyn girls in California, they all go, yes, because you can only buy whole pies. I'm like, we just want a slice. They're like, what? I'm like, forget it. You don't even know what I'm talking about. They're just things. They think when we say we don't like those bagels, they're like, these bagels are delicious. I'm like, you California people have never tasted a bagel. I'm just telling you. So sometimes you need to be with your people, and sometimes girls need to be with their people. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't mean that they suddenly don't know how to manage the co-ed world, whether it's Girl Scouts or an all-girls school. My 4 years at Shipman changed my life completely. That intellectual play, the leadership, the courage, the empathy, the outreach in the community, all of it made such a difference for me. And it didn't make me scared to be in a co-ed school. In fact, it was, as I said, it was the kind of the antibodies I needed to have built up against sexism in the world. So I'm a big fan. Obviously, I've spent my life in girls' education. Most of my career has been in girls' schools. And I don't think that's a mistake. It may not be the right place for every girl, but as I was saying to you earlier, Clay, that, you read the research on stereotype threat, Claude Steele, Joshua Aronson. The idea that if you call forth your race, your gender, to the point where it may actually make you fear that you're going to confirm some of the negative stereotypes, what happens in a girls' school is that after a while, it's like air. It just is. No one's reminding you every moment that you're a girl. We just are scholars or athletes or yearbook editors. It just is the way we are in the world. So that all of the other things that are readily available for you, you just jump into and engage because no one's making you worry about whether or not being a girl is a liability.
Well, and also it's right around, early tween, pre-puberty when the research shows confidence starts to drop, and so you really do probably get into situations where girls who were once, in fourth grade, happy to be speaking up in class, are less likely, and boys continue to just raise their hand. And
And in the girls' school, you don't have those interruptions because you still have struggles. So don't get me wrong. It's not like,
Right.
woo, we're here and everything's great in the world and we don't struggle at all. So remember, I talked about the perfectionism and the academic lives of the girls. But what you do have are that spiral, you can interrupt it much faster. You look around, say, look around you. How many girls do you see doing great things? Come on, go. And you don't have girls kind of dwelling and marinating in pity or fear, not for long, because you have models and systems all around you that support their growth. So I'm a big fan. I don't know how many, just as a show of hands, have you spent any time in an all-female setting, whether a school, grad school, undergrad, not undergrad, obviously, some of you are Barnard girls, Barnard women. So you know, there's actually a lot of evidence that shows that women who have done amazing things in life have been one of two things: in a girls' school or an athlete.
No, the evidence on the sports is incredible. There's a lot of data that shows, but I think there's 2 or 3 studies that have been done that show that the longer women play competitive sports through high school and then through college, it's just there's a direct correlation to their success and earning power. And it is remarkable because most of these things are so mushy, right? It's hard to find a direct connection anywhere, but in the sports it is. But I think part of that is because, I mean, obviously sports teaches a lot of things, but I think what girls are getting from sports is that risk-taking and failure exercise. So I think, because a lot of parents will say to me, well, but my girl's not athletic, she's not on a team. It's like, that's not the only way, but that is a way that I think where the lessons are built in. And you know, you're on a team and the parents aren't having to think about how am I going to create another opportunity for my child to step outside of her comfort zone, right? It's just more natural.
And it's public failure. You know, I was not an athlete. I love Soul Cycle now as an adult, but I was not an athlete. And I would argue with my husband. My husband married up. He went to Brown, so you know he did a good job. I tease him all the time. But I'm a singer, and I directed gospel choir when I was at Columbia, and I would say, Robert, being on a team is like the choir, and you know the boys don't have to do sports. And he was a basketball player, and he loves sports. And he was like, Wanda, here's the difference. You know, the reason why we have to put girls in sports and boys in sports is because when you stood up to sing, everyone was quiet. They allowed you to do what you wanted to do. When you are an athlete, it invites contentiousness and controversy, and no one stood up in the middle of a concert and said la 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 while you were singing. So he's like, the reason why girls, you know, develop confidence in sports is because someone is actually trying to stop you from doing what you want to do, and that, you know, that adversarial environment brings strength, builds the sense of efficacy and doing something. And I said, okay, Robert, you win that argument, whatever, you know. But so I get it. So one of the things that I'm doing right now is trying to build, if you can believe it, my school is really, as I said to you, it's an old school. It does not have a regulation-sized gymnasium. If we were a boys' school or co-ed school, that gym would have been built decades ago. There's no three-point line in this little cute gym where you can play dodgeball, but not you can't win at the buzzer.
The girls, I mean, I know it's from what I've seen, it's a problem with girls. They drop out of sports, I think, at 2 or 3 times the rate when they hit puberty as the boys do. And they just, either they're losing confidence. I've had a number of athletic directors say that they think the girls, once they start to hit high school, they just want to focus on their studies, right? They become really, really uber perfectionistic, and they want to have all their time to do well. And so it's really hard to encourage girls in some cases to stick with it.
Yeah, you know, so interesting. Just because I'm looking at Lisa Landau Carney in front of me. You know, I thought as I'm thinking about that whole idea also of Columbia going, all the teams, the whole athletics program needed to be revamped and invite women right to it. And you know, we finally won a football game during the 80s. That happened. 1988. It happened before we graduated, and it was a great celebration on campus that day. But thinking of all the females who were, whether they were fencers or runners or basketball players, you know, I think that space is also really important as I recognize all the various arenas where women can grow and develop a sense of who they can be. I think, my husband would be cracking up listening to me say this because he says, Wanda, you really like sneakers as, ornaments, not as real shoes. But I think, I think athletics is really, academics, athletics, the arts, all of it allows for girls to have free expression of who they are and what they can do. It's amazing.
And what's your sense of how, of the media? I mean, I think we all know this instinctively, but the impact of media, images, social media on girls. I mean, it's just, it's
that's a hard one.
It's gigantic.
Yeah, I'm an advisor for Common Sense Media, which is an amazing a nonprofit that seeks to create a space. It's like the AARP for kids. That's how Jim Steyer describes it. He's the guy who created it, and they work very hard to help parents and educators navigate media so that you can pick a certain video or a game or a piece of music and know that it's sending the right message or presenting the right images to children. And as much as I'd like to think that children aren't spending time on screens, the research is incredible to think of how much time children are actually in front of a screen. Yesterday on the airplane here, my sons are with me in New York this weekend. My son, he had his phone, his iPad, and had convinced me to pick some movie that I swiped on Virgin America that he had 3 screens. I said, David, 3 screens, really? And he's like, Mom, I got this. I'm just like, what are you doing? But so the influence is very much there, and I have these really interesting and sometimes frustrating conversations with girls because they want to be able to show everything and not have anybody judge them for it. And so this whole idea of slut shaming, and I should be able to wear that, and it should be as short or as low, and I'm really again, this is one of those times where you have to remind girls about how they are seen in the world, regardless of how great they may feel about their, bodies. There are certain professions and places in the world where you just don't need to show all that or do all that. And I think the girls are getting messages that are really, really hard to discern. I should look like a fashion model, but, at the same time, can I fit that? Or, does that outfit look good on me? Or should I, buy that piece of clothing because it has that certain label? The girls are so deeply influenced by what they see. They want to be like XYZ, and there are lots of YouTube stars as well as television stars and television shows, and there's this aspiration to be just like them, and they want to claim their space and not have anybody tell them that what they're doing kind of violates the codes of being a proper girl. And that's where we just have these really interesting conversations at school because they don't want to be judged for the short skirt. But then they want to wear it because this is what my body looks like, and they'll turn your own words back on you. Didn't you say we should be confident in our bodies? And didn't you? And I'm like, yes, but I didn't say you should show it at the high school interview, and so this is back and forth all of the time about what's appropriate and can I see a rated R movie? Do I have to be 13 to see a PG-13? It goes on and on. And I think it's one of the most complicated spaces. I haven't really frankly figured it out as a mom or the girls want to be seen as beautiful. One of my students said to me the other week, she said, Ms. Holland Greene, I know we're really smart and I know we're supposed to change the world, but I want to be desired. Isn't that powerful? I want to be desired. And, the prim and proper school marm that I could say that I am not, that I could say, oh, don't worry about being desired. That's terrible. You just be smart and go forth. I'm like, no, we all want to be desired. That's real. And so when they see these beautiful women on television that are desirable.
Well, and by the way, boys the data shows that adolescent boys now have as much body anxiety as girls. So, not that, I think that's not one area where I think we want equality, unfortunately.
Seriously.
But,
Clay, you're in television. I mean, you did your career as a journalist. I mean, do you feel like, I mean, you have a daughter, and I don't. So is Della caught up in what Kim Kardashian is doing? I mean, I don't know.
No,
Maybe that's not a fair
Della's
question.
Della's a sort of grumpy, iconoclastic, different child altogether. So she's a tomboy. She's angry. She's discovered now she's the only girl now. Spring hit. She puts on her long basketball shorts. She's now the only girl in the grade who's, as she put it, is not wearing short shorts. And of course, her definition of short shorts is sort of halfway between, oh my God, Mom, Ava's wearing short shorts. And I looked at Ava's shorts, like 4 inches above her knee. I'm like, okay, so we have different challenges, but she, nonetheless, she feels that pressure, right? They all do, because it's out there. Well, we have, I think, some time left for questions. So we would love to hear what any of you are interested in asking about. Yes.
Hi.
Fourth grade daughter.
Oh, okay.
I know exactly.
Yes, that's it.
I have a 7-year-old son.
Ah.
And I live in New Jersey, in a rather Bergen County, rather. A lot of the people in that area work in the city. That's the background. I was shocked that there weren't as many science, technology, and engineering at the school that I go to. So like you see a problem, you're trying to solve it. So I brought Liberty Science Center
Love that place.
program. Took registration enrollment. I had offerings for the younger grades, grades 1 to 2, and then grades 3 to 4. I was shocked when I saw the registration. I think it was 15, class size of 15. 13 were boys for the younger grades. The older grades, it was a little bit more balanced. I don't think because necessarily parents thought, oh, it'd be good for my daughter to take it. It's because we're now in standardized testing for science. I thought, not in today's day and age, that can't be true. So I think there's a lot of reasons, and I'd like to hear your reasoning, what you think might be the reasons for this, both from the child's perspective as well as from the parents who are enrolling their children. Thank you.
What do you think, Wanda?
Well, it's interesting. Walk through a toy store. Just walk through. Look, I shop for my goddaughter in the boys section. That's where all the things that you build, that's where, and don't get me started on the pretty colored pink Lego. Like, why did we change the colors of Lego? Because girls, Lego friends, let's build a hair salon. This is ridiculous, right? But you go to the girls section and there's My Pretty Pony and love it. I mean, let girls play, with their Sephora makeup kits or whatever if they want to. But at the end of the day, at the very, very beginning, and how children play and how they're socialized and what they're encouraged to do in the playground, what they're asked about as they walk through the street. So I worked for 5 years at Columbia Greenhouse Nursery School. It's so great to be right across the street. It's one of the most amazing places where I started my career. And I love the way we would design the classrooms, where I first started learning about curriculum design, long before I got to Teachers College, whereby what you set up for children to engage in speaks to them about what is available in the world. So if everything that you put out, of all the art materials, and that's it, well, that's what the children are going to do. And if you see children, even after you put lots of things out in the classroom, if you see them gravitating toward things, that's when the teacher has to say, you know what, today you're going to play with things that are different. And my children are, and I'm raising these feminist boys in my house, but whether they like it or not. But my sons draw as much as they play with Lego. And that's because I had to design it that way, because the trucks and all that, and zooming and things falling and crashing, that was what they were naturally inclined to do. And I had to introduce them to other things. And so one of the things that we've seen in terms of girls in STEM is that what Claire was talking about, purpose, a lot of times if you don't understand the practical implication of what you're doing, it feels very abstract. So Tufts is a really good example of this. Tufts has a really interesting, their engineering school, where the women were leaving and they weren't staying, and then they changed the courses. And all of a sudden, matriculation changed because the engineering courses had purpose. They had a connection, whether it's social entrepreneurship, whether it's, when there's a real practical reason. That's why physics, I think, is actually so much more interesting for girls than chemistry, because it's practical. And sorry, Virginia, where is she? She's my Virginia Cornish professor, first Columbia alumna, who's a full professor at Columbia, Virginia, who's here today. But I think she'd agree with me. Physics is, I think for a younger girl, physics is easier. So when they're building things, when they're constructing things, but you have to introduce it, and you have to connect it to the so what. And to me, that is how you start at a very early age. You cannot tell a 10-year-old that she's suddenly good at math. That has to start very, very
well,
early
and there's
on.
also, two things, by the way. Our engineering school is really doing great work on that, and that's one reason why they're doing so well with women, because the so what in terms of where engineering goes is there, and I agree. But there is also some research that I've seen that shows that girls' brains in math and boys' brains in English and verbal skills develop at different rates. And so that's an issue as well. And if you're not aware of that, you will end up having girls label themselves as bad at math when that's just not the case. But great question. There's so many to choose from. Yes, right there.
Interesting book called Women Don't Ask, which has sort of, I've been amazed by how pegged I feel by it. And I think of myself as a confident woman. I'm an architect. I'm the only woman in the room all the time. But the book talks about asking for a raise, asking for a promotion, asking for as much as a man would ask if you bothered to ask. And I don't do those things. And I'm thinking about that a lot and asking the women that I know, what's your experience with this? Have you ever asked for a raise?
Oh yeah.
And so I feel like that's one of the things that never came. I never thought about this. And what are you telling the girls? How are you saying anything to the women, the young women in your school about that?
All the time. You know what I love, and I always say this, when women, there are 3 teachers right now who are negotiating their salaries as I hire them, and the first thing I say is, I'm going to take my head of school hat off for a moment and just say, you go girl, thank you for asking me for more. And sometimes the answer is no, that I can't, and sometimes the answer is yes, but I love that they have asked, and I amplify their voice by saying, this is exactly what you should be doing. And girls, I absolutely think that women need to ask more, but here's the thing. When you don't ask, I think it's because you've internalized the message that you don't deserve it. So we can talk, the people who study sociology, obviously, and know more about this than I do. But this idea of internalized depression, right? I think that's why people don't ask, because they somehow have taken in all the messages that I don't deserve and I don't belong, and this whole idea of being the imposter and the fraud. That's not really your voice. That's somebody else's voice that you then adopted as your own. And when you, like Mary Oliver, she says, you come to recognize the voice that is your own, then you start to ask, because you're like, the voice that's in me says I deserve this. That other voice is actually not you. That voice is a lying voice that is trying to hold you back. That's what I tell girls. I say, when you hear that voice that says, don't ask, be quiet, that's an external voice that you think is yours, but that's not actually your voice. Your voice says, ask.
Well, and it's also true, let me see, there we go. It's also true that I think for women, we feel much more emboldened and likely to ask for things when we have, or do things, or try something new, when somebody we respect suggests we do it or backs us up. And so when usually people say, well, what can I do? How can I help to support women or girls? And I say, the best thing you can do isn't to listen to them and tell them everything's great and talk a little bit more and I'll commiserate with you, because we do that really well. But the best thing you can do is to push them to do something uncomfortable, like take a risk, run for office, ask for more money. I know you can do it. Give them a push, and know that for you, getting some support from somewhere is going to be really helpful. You just have to build the habit. it's hard to do, but I've learned to do it, 54 years old, building confidence. So it's
it.
hard, but you can do it. We have gotten the wrap sign. I know we want to keep on schedule today, but thank you very much.
Thank
It's
you,
been
everybody.
a fantastic discussion. Thanks, Wanda.
Thank you.